things are now much better in two ways. One is, and this is a political change, that senior independent schools are much more interested in being open to children who have been to state primary schools. They don't want to place artificial barriers in the way of parents who don't have the social capital, don't have the immediate resources to go beyond state education at primary level. So they have learnt how to take on children who have been to a good primary school and are coming out with the sort of accomplishments and standard of education that that implies. Secondly, there has been an immense improvement in the tutoring business. 30 years ago, it was pretty random what you could find in tutors. Now there are tutors companies coming out of your ears. We review a good collection of them in the Good Schools Guide. Also, you will find clustering round any independent school which goes in seriously for examination as a way of entry at age 11. There will be a collection of local tutors who are good at helping your child get into a particular school. The trick there is not to ask around among your classmates as to who they're using, because if they've got a good tutor, they won't want to share it with you. Your child might take the place that they want for theirs. Ask someone who got their child into the school 2 years ago who they used. And then they ought to be happy to pass you on to whoever they are really grateful to for having helped their child make that transition. But whether it's a tutor company or whether it's a local tutor, there's really good support available. You don't need it for much more than the last 2 years in primary school, but it really helps if you use it at that stage. Because then you know that your child not only will have as good a chance as any of passing the entrance, but that when they actually get into the school, they'll be up to speed. They won't suddenly find that they're half a year behind and having to catch up and being made to seem thick in all the lessons they're part of just because they haven't had a chance to learn things. So it's a transition which is, if you manage it, if you look after it as parents, gets really easy to make. In the junior years of senior schools, 11 to 16, it's really a question of what's available to you. There are, again in London, a lot of good state schools, a lot of schools that manage well at that level. But by that time, motivating your child is much more important. The school's really got to be providing the environment that they feel comfortable in and not sidelined or bullied or just not inspired by. There's got whatever they really value is got to be something that the school provides so that they can draw on that when it comes to, looking at my daughter, for instance, art is what motivates her. She needs a really good art teacher. If she has a really good art teacher, she does well in French and maths, because her whole attitude to school is governed by wanting to be there for the art lessons, wanting to be there for the art after school. One of the great reasons for why people do use independent schools at that age is that a lot of state schools let the kids go at 3 o'clock or 3:30. And what are you supposed to do about that in London? No, it's not a great arrangement if you're hoping your child will spend that time studying. So how the whole offer from the state secondary school becomes an important thing to evaluate. But even given that, I wouldn't, if I'd happened to live in the catchment area, have had any hesitation in sending my daughter to Camden Girls, say. Something which I think she would have loved. I happened to be living in South London at the time, so there wasn't much point in dreaming of that. But friends of mine are certainly using grey coats and other such schools, and those who are lucky enough to have religion will have a set of schools that they can access from really quite a long way away. Tony Blair, when he was Prime Minister, lived 6 miles from the London Oratory, but still managed to get his children into that because his wife was Catholic. So you sometimes having a particular characteristic that a school is built around can help you get in from some way distant. Greycoats, for instance, recruits each year a batch of language scholars. You can do that from Wandsworth and still get in. Other schools will recruit on music or on some other characteristics. So you can find that there are state schools and really good state schools that are within reach of you. At sixth form, there's a really big move in terms of the overall population of the UK from state schools into independent schools. I did that myself for my son, who was in a state school till he was 16, and then had an opportunity to move to the local sixth form college, where I knew there was no chance whatsoever he would do any work, because sixth form college is a really free environment. You're not pegged down to you probably only got 3 classes a day. No one's watching what you do in between time. No one's making sure you study. You wander off into town and go to the cafe with your mates or whatever. And I knew that would be him. So I sent him to Hurtwood House, who are here today. And he didn't come home for 8 weeks because they wouldn't let him home until he caught up with his homework. And he ended up with some A-levels, and he never would have done otherwise. So in independent schools at sixth form, you often get really good teaching, you get small classes, you get really, really experienced people in terms of getting you ready for university and organizing the university entrance. But most of all, particularly for boys at that sort of age, you get given an environment where you actually have to do the work. And it is really noticeable that by the time we get to the end of schooling, there's about 15-16% of the UK population who are in independent schools, whereas earlier on, at the end of primary, it's only about 5%. So there's a big move into independent education at 16. But there's also a move the other way. There are quite a lot of kids who come out of independent education and go into state education. That has 2 origins. One, that they've just grown up. They can't take the restrictions of school anymore. They don't want to be hemmed in by school rules and discipline. They need the freedom. They will work better with freedom. And the other is that these big sixth form colleges will offer subjects and opportunities which are just not available in a rather smaller independent school sixth form. It's harder to make that transition because of the great change in discipline. You've suddenly got to, at the same time as taking on a whole new set of friends, you've got to learn the discipline of working without being made to work. So you've got to judge that carefully. There's quite a lot of kids, I think, who don't make it, who just sort of flop around for a bit. To them, I would say, well, come on, why waste your time at a sixth form college? Go and get a job. Go and do an apprenticeship. Go and do something which actually channels you into life. If you know you want to get out of school, go and get out of school properly. There's lots of good apprenticeships around. There's lots of good ways of getting on through apprenticeships. You can end up with a master's degree from an apprenticeship these days. Take a look at getting out into the real world rather than just messing around for a few years. The last big flow between independent and state, of course, takes place in counties and places with grammar schools. If you have got available to you a state grammar school with a good reputation, it is really hard to see why you would think of sending your child to an independent school. Maybe like my daughter, you really want good art, and that isn't on offer at a fairly straightforward grammar school. But if you're looking for an academic education, the good English grammar schools provide a really good, free state education. But it's competitive to get into them. So there's a lot of independent prep schools that you can move to for the last few years, 8 to 11, to be really schooled in getting past the grammar school entrance. And you'll find a lot of that in Kent, and you'll find schools like that clustered around any serious patch of grammar schools in London. And that can be really worth considering, because it's hard for a school, if you've got a mixed school system generally, a primary can't devote its whole effort to getting your children through a competitive exam when most of its children aren't doing that. So there's a really good argument for moving to for the last few years, to an independent school to get you through that grammar school exam, and then you're into these halcyon fields of an excellent free education. So my overall message to you today is, in spite of being at an independent school show, really look intelligently at how you can mix the two systems. Work it in a way that suits you because of the greater length of day and depth of care available from independent systems, but also suits your child in terms of the environment they need to flourish in. But don't ever worry about dropping into and out of the state and independent systems as suits you. The system these days is attuned to that, and as long as you take care, you'll make a success of it.